Yesterday. I flew in Saturday night, but I drove Thursday morning. I slept in my friend's house and lost like a morning. And I just needed to start it open to eat. Yeah.
Must be a popular time. No, just in general. Noon must be a good time for council.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I'd rather do it. Yeah, it's not so sleepy.
I'm better at it. Yeah.
You are.
They can tell you they're not leaving.
Yeah,
I know. I can.
Ingredients are all here.
It's right in the back.
It's not hard to figure.
Yeah.
Maybe I should write it to me.
Yeah, if he's on
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Obi Wan should bring you to class.
So 3 times. You guys, one of you's gonna be a mayor.
Not
That's why you should do it.
Nice to meet you.
You need to appoint John elect down as that's the way.
Increase the position on you. There are other, they feel the council.
I saw the nine.
I can't reach the out.
We can fix that.
I'm not a,
Gotta wait.
like, 7 p.m. would be an okay meeting.
Yeah. Okay, it's 12 o'clock. Are we recording it? Okay. Thank you all for coming. 12 o'clock. Do we need to officially appoint
Mayor Pro Tem?
I elect John Leo.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye. Okay. It's 12 o'clock, let's open the meeting. And for the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. To the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Jamie Melky,
Here.
Nancy Rondell.
Here.
And Mayor Leo.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Okay. Citizens' comments. This is your chance to comment on anything that is not on the agenda for the meeting. Mr. Esposito.
Good afternoon, Michael Esposito from Irish Boat Shop. As many of you know, after 30 years of exciting experience in the boat shop, I'm retiring. I wanted to introduce Shay Cross, who actually became president a few days ago, as an official act. So wanted to introduce him, have him just say a couple words, and hopefully the wonderful relationship that's gone on between the boat shop and the city. Although it's had its ups and downs, generally it's been very, very good, and will continue. So thank you.
You didn't mention any downs.
Any relationship has ups and downs.
Good afternoon, as Michael said, my name is Shay Cross. I come by way of Boca Raton, Florida, so this 40-something degree level stuff is gonna be a little bit of an acclimation for me.
Oh, you haven't seen anything yet.
I know, so I look forward to working with all of you in the local area. I live just up Point Street, so looking forward to getting to know Harbor Springs even better.
Welcome aboard.
Anyone else?
Real quick, so I feel like I'm introducing Vanna White, but Tyler. I wanted to show everybody our new uniform, so we pulled out our new uniform. We pulled out our new uniforms, and he's like a prime example. So these are our new uniforms. We went to a navy blue. The officers are all wearing what's called an external vest carrier. It takes a lot of the weight, like Kyle had a problem with them because like they look sort of militaristic. And so I had a little bit of problem. They twisted my arm, actually broke my left arm, but they convinced me to do it. And it takes a lot of this weight off your gun belt, which releases pressure on your waist and on your back. And so, and then in the summer, when we're in the office doing reports, it's much easier to take this off. Actually, the vest, bulletproof vest is inside that. It comes off. So it's much easier to take off. It's Tyler can explain a little bit better.
It's, the whole thing is about weight distribution, so you're taking 20 pounds off your waist and you're kind of putting it more up here and kind of, you get adjusted to each way, because my back had been hurting up until I went to North Dakota 2 weeks ago. And I hadn't been wearing one, and I came back and started wearing this, it's not hurting as much, and it's, more places are going to it, and it's much more comfortable.
So I was a little skeptical, but we did a lot of research, and I showed you our new shoulder patch. We changed our shoulder patches as well. And we're limiting what goes on the exterior, so it's not, you'll see some officers from other agencies that have, like, it looks like they just got off the plane from a war. And I don't want that up here, our citizens don't want it. So I felt this is a good compromise. It still looks professional. And then this is a uniform that I'll be wearing the majority of the time. But I just wanted to show you that. And we're also doing No Shave November, where the officers contribute funds, and those funds are donated to charities. So last year we donated, I think, $400 some to a couple women resource center and another charity. So my wife forbid me from doing it this year, but yeah, the officers are doing it. So if you wonder why we're growing beers for November, what that is, but I just want to show our uniforms off, and we're real excited. You turn around with that. And he's a prime person to do it. Tyler does a great job.
Many steps.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Tyler.
Anything else? Anyone online?
If anyone online has a comment, please raise your Zoom hand.
Okay. Okay. I guess we're on to item 2, consent agenda. You have a chance to review the consent agenda. Any comments, observations?
I'm fine with it. The one thing about the well, we've pulled with the well, we didn't inspect it, but we pulled it. Am I right, Lucas, 12 years ago, help me remember.
Basically, the last time it was completely pulled, they pulled the pump mechanism out, so it's the shaft that goes down to the
Right.
impeller, if you will. And that's what does the actual pumping. At that point in time, there was not a video assessment of the screen and everything. Kind of based on that, the pump rate that well was producing at that point in time wasn't showing signs of diminishing. So there wasn't an inspection
So they did.
done at that point in time. And since it had been so long, that's why we incorporated that into this time with pulling the pump.
And then as a result of this, we're gonna set up an inspection schedule going forward. I mean, 40 years is a long time to not inspect a pump.
And like I said, the pump actually, when it gets pulled, that all gets rebuilt, the screen, and historically, they based it on what your pump, how it performed when it went in. Yeah, we won't be going nearly that long, with the diminished cost of what the video inspection costs now compared to what it did back in the day. Yeah, probably each time it would be wise to do it, just the well casings are getting up in age, so we'll probably do that.
More frequent. And then I just had a question in the quote, $23,500 to do that. It leads with labor and materials to mobilize to site. They're already gonna be on site. Isn't this gonna be done as part of the rebuild that the grant is covering?
It's a different crew, different setup that they bring up. So they had the big crane truck that came to pull the pumps arc out, and this will be a different crew that comes up.
Just sounded like a little bit of a double dip, but I guess it's. Okay, anything else? Any comments from the public on the consent agenda? Or online?
I don't see any.
Okay, can we get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay.
John Leo,
Yes.
Nancy Rendell.
Yes.
David Melky.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, so I guess we're on to,
3A. Yep, all right, 3A is the ordinance number 438 on short-term rentals. So this stems from the Johnson versus City of Harbor Springs lawsuit. As a reminder, the city denied a short-term rental license to Ms. Johnson after she claimed to have submitted it in a timely manner. The city, we responded that we never received it, so that resulted in this lawsuit after she came to council and appealed to have a license. To resolve this case, council is considering increasing the number of available licenses in the residential district from 61 to 63. This would allow for the two individuals who insisted they submitted their applications on time to receive their licenses without further litigation. The planning commission discussed and recommended approval at their October meeting. And of course, we've discussed this in closed session, the lawsuit at a closed session at a previous meeting.
should we get some public input first? Okay, any commentary on 3A?
Margie Marks, Harbor Street, does this, I did read through the documents, and it said something in there that changes can be made at the discretion of the city. Are we setting ourselves up for this kind of a thing if people are saying, well, I sent this and you didn't get it, and now I'm gonna sue you, and I mean, when's the full stop on that?
Well, we have put some things in place
Mhm.
since we've had this hiccup, if you will. So that hopefully this cannot happen again in terms of the way we will deal with contacting people, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, contacting people and the expectation that they can also contact us ahead of the time. That's really partly what drove some of this system.
And is everything still going to be done through snail mail, or are we looking at doing some kind of application process?
We've done snail mail, we've also done email, right? I think both, we've sent out letters through both.
And the letters that are sent via postal and email are very specific, very
no room for error if you actually read it.
Okay,
This is when it's due. If it's not postmarked or in my hands by that day, it's done.
so the application has to be by mail, not by email?
Yes, and then they can send the documents, they still have to come in the pay, but,
I gotcha.
you know, we've got them that will come in the mail, but. If it's not here in this office on the due date. That's it.
Okay.
But your question is a good one. Are we setting ourselves
Yeah,
up? And I think if you've attended meetings, we take setting precedent pretty seriously. But a lot of discussion went into this, and like we have in the past with short-term rentals, we've learned throughout a number of iterations. We think the change is justified, and we think we've closed the holes in the system that allowed it to happen to begin. And at this point, I believe it would be safe to say anyone who has a short-term rental license is well aware of the need to get their paperwork in on time.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone online, Victor?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Okay, any comments from council?
I have a comment. This doesn't really maybe affect what we're talking about today, but there, in this, one of these licenses, there's an ad on Airbnb that calls out some city residents and some city staff that I consider to be very inappropriate. So I just would like it to be part of the public record that I'm aware of that, council's aware of that, and that is not the way to deal when someone's upset with something. So just need that to be out there.
Do you think it affects our decision to move
No,
forward?
probably not. Probably not. I just do think it's important, you know, that if a city resident has an issue with council planning, whatever decisions we make, there are appropriate ways to handle that and there are inappropriate ways to handle that. And I consider this to be inappropriate.
Well, the issue was brought to council. I think that we dealt with it openly and honestly. And
And with lots of public comment.
that's right. We had plenty of opportunity to communicate, so this is just not how anyone would like to be treated.
That's exactly right.
I guess at this point, we need a motion. If we're gonna move forward, we need a motion to
Adopt the ordinance 438.
correct.
Jamie,
I'll make the motion to adopt whatever the number is,
438.
438.
I'll
Perfect.
second the motion.
Nancy Rundell,
Yes.
John Leo,
Yes.
Jamie Melky.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay,
Thank you, council. We move accordingly.
thanks.
and you and Vic, you have what you need.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
3D?
All right, alternative substation location cost estimates. So at previous council meeting, development was a new private property owner who had purchased a property between Hoyt and Vesta Road, approached the city with interest in locating a substation on their property. Previous owners were not interested. So this owner, we talked to him, and one of his requests that he would want to consider is to have the 46 kV transmission lines that cut through his property buried or put underground. So we met with that individual, and then I met with our GRP, our engineer, and we said we would provide council with some cost estimates of what different possibilities could look like for locating a substation there with lines buried, some lines not buried, and potentially two different spots for the substation up there. So before I go to the details, I just want to orient ourselves on the map. I don't know if it's made it here. Okay, yeah. Just so, because it can be a little confusing about transmission lines versus distribution lines and what we're talking about here. So the property in question, several of these parcels right here, I believe these 5 parcels are all owned by the same individual where these 2 red dots are on. So the main location that we're looking at is right here because there already is an easement that cuts through this property, a road that accesses back there. This yellow line and purple line, they're really the same line. I just put them separate so you can see they're, talking about two different things here. So the purple line would be the existing 46 kV transmission line that comes all the way from our existing substation. These yellow lines are proposed underground or overground routes for the new distribution lines. So we would no longer need a transmission line to come out of these the substation here. You would need a transmission line to get to the substation, and then you would need distribution lines to go from there. So those distribution lines are usually on smaller poles, or they can be underground. So just to kind of orient you where we're talking about, there's this one spot right here. This is number one, and this is proposals number two, location number two. One is this red dot right here, and second one's right here. So we looked at 4 different alternatives compared to as the Deer Park location as the base, the base, I would say, cost estimate. And this cost estimate for the Deer Park location came at about $5.87 million, and that is including the cost of the wall, which at a high level estimate puts it at about $750,000. It's really hard to narrow an estimate for the wall beyond that until you do some more engineering and design work. But roughly, this cost includes the wall. That's about $7.75 million. That cost is for the wall. So this second option, substation Hoyt Road, is this. It's $550,000 cheaper than or less expensive than this Deer Park. But what it includes is essentially mostly as exists with overhead wires. So we're not burying the lines. Only lines I think that would be buried were the ones that are coming out this distribution line from the substation that would follow the easement road. But the 46 kV line, transmission line, would still be above ground. Similarly, the next cost was just burying a few more lines, but not burying all the lines. When we get to this cost, so that still keeps the cost for number 3, this one right here, a little less expensive than the Zoll Street Deer Park location. But when we talk about burying all the lines, then the cost, including the transmission line, the cost is about $570,000 more expensive than this location. And then when we talk about locating the substation roughly around here, and this wouldn't be an exact spot, but near Bester Road, it's a lot more expensive. I think it was about $800,000 more expensive. And I think the reason why that one's even more expensive is not that the substation itself is more expensive, is that we would no longer be crossing, this option would no longer cross all these private properties. So you'd have to follow Bester Road and go down to Hoyt Road for the distribution lines. So that's added cost to that. You would still need a transmission line on Bester Road to get to the substation, but you're no longer cutting through the properties. And again, the reason why we were looking at those options is because that's one of the requests by property owner there was to bury the lines, to have them consider selling or giving us this property for siting a substation there. And we also, considering the property owner right here, who there is an easement. That easement isn't, necessarily clear whether it's, allowed for to be used as a commercial or electric utility purpose. So they expressed that they'd be more supportive of it if the lines that cross through their property were buried as well, these distribution lines. So
That's the property with the easement
with
to get to.
the access, yep, that has access to this property back here.
Right.
So we did look at all the, we look at those costs. Of course, these are estimates, but our engineer spent a lot of time, 2-3 weeks on this, nailing it down. And there's a lot of, in his memo, there's a lot there, but that actually sums up what the projects are. One of the issues to consider with these last 2 options especially is that when you bundle all the circuits, the distribution circuits into one place, so if you put them all underground in one line or one bundle, the risk to losing electricity to our grid or system is significantly increased, because if someone digs that up and cuts all the lines, then you're out of electricity. So it's always best practices to have those lines at least at 2 separate locations. So that's why we have one line going overhead usually in one direction and one line going underground in another direction. Well, I think we have 3 circuit lines, I believe, that usually come out of that. But Dan, if Dan's in the back if you correct me. We have three, and usually we bundle two together and one separately, so,
So there's redundancy.
yes, there's redundancy there. Dan, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to what I went over here, if you had any thoughts, because I know you talked to some.
So the only thing I would add is, Dan Huey, electrical supervisor, is just to clarify that Dave, the owners, I went to them.
Yep.
They didn't come to me.
Okay.
Cause he did get a little slack
Oh, all right.
from a couple neighbors, so.
Sorry
I went
about
to him. He
No,
didn't come to me.
apologize about that. Lucas, do you have anything to add? Or? And Michael, he couldn't be here. He would have been able to be here if it was at 7, but you know, meeting, change the time on him. So really what I think I'm asking for from my perspective is whether or not council would like me to further engage the property owner on any of these options. I know the owner has expressed interest to bury the lines. And I know some of these options could be less expensive and some more expensive. So if council wants to continue approaching and engaging him on if he's open to some of these options that council is open to considering, then I can approach him on those.
Has he given any feedback as to preference? I mean, if we say we don't want to put all of the lines underground, is he open to the idea of some of them being above ground?
We had preliminary conversations about that, but I'm not sure. I've not showed him these proposals, the way they're underground, overground here. So I wanted to come to council first before.
So we don't really know.
Don't really know.
And we don't know if the easement could be used for access to the substation.
Jim, can you clarify? Because
there's a little ambiguity in the easement. It refers to the fact that it is designed for utility purposes, but it also states expressly it's limited to residential use. So there's something there, and it is an easement, and I think we would, if we got into this, we'd want to negotiate something with the owner. If the owner is interested in having underground in exchange for granting the easement per se, that might be something we'd be interested in pursuing.
And your write-up stated that none of the cost estimates included the purchase of the land.
no, and because it's not clear to me what our discussions with the property owner, whether, how this would work, if is it an exchange of, I mean, obviously it doesn't work like that on paper, but if we bury the lines, what kind of sale is it? So I'm not sure, what he would sell us the land for, or is it the cost of burying the lines and the sale of the land? I'm not sure how that would work out.
But any cost for the land would increase the project cost.
Potentially.
Which would further.
Yeah.
Unless there were a direct offset.
Yeah, exactly, because we're burying the lines in exchange for the property. I don't know how that would work exactly legally, but that's how it.
Well, you need to come up with what's the equivalency of lines
exactly.
versus property value.
Yeah.
And these properties are not in the city, they're in the township.
Correct.
Have we had any input feedback from the township?
I did talk to the township supervisor, and he didn't express any negativity about it, but we still would have to go through the planning commission process and there.
Right.
We do have the right, I think utilities have a right to place their infrastructure, and they can't just be denied for placing essential infrastructure and services on land. So I don't think it wouldn't be something that would be denied, I believe, at the plant, or could be denied. But it's something we don't know how long the process could be and what other additional conditions the planning commission could put on the project. Those are unknowns.
And have we had any feedback from any of the neighbors joining this?
I have not heard, other than some conversations with a neighbor who had conversations with the owners of the easement property. I haven't had any feedback from anyone that lives up there that was negative or positive about this.
And just to clarify, all of these comparisons in this chart are against the Zoll Street option with a $750,000 wall.
Yes.
If you take that out, which is more apples to apples in my mind, they're all more expensive.
Correct.
Or have the potential to be.
Based on this analysis.
Yeah. Would we have to do further surveys up there, up on the other sites also, like we had done here? We would have.
We have to do some more geotechnical investigations, yes. Yep. we'd have to do, that's just
like we
due
did.
diligence, yeah, you'd have to do that there.
So that's another added expense to those sites. Okay.
Should we get some public
Yeah,
comment before
yeah.
we continue?
Yeah,
I'm Chip Everest, Fort Beach Drive. And I really appreciate the city going to this effort to get the numbers. It's encouraging for sure. I would just like to remind everybody that I believe that we need a sixth column. And that would be including the Lake Street property, which is $1 million cheaper than the Zoll Street property. And I think it's, you know, I don't want to take that off the table, even if people think it's off the table already. I would like to put it back on the table because, you know, $1 million is obviously very significant. And I just want to make sure that that's included. You know, I believe when you make financial decisions, personally, when I make financial decisions, I treat it like it's my money. And I feel like this is my money. I live in the city, I pay electric bills. So I'm just very fiscally aware of how much things are costing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, Victor, you mentioned that there's a higher risk associated with the lines being buried underground because you bundle them.
No, I must have misspoken. I said that. I said it's when they're all on the same line together. So if they're buried together, all together at once, it's not because they're underground, they're higher risk, it's because they're all together.
But if you did this project and you put them underground, they would be all together?
It doesn't have to be, no, but one of the options, going along Bester Road down White Road includes them all bundled together.
So my question really is there a comparison to the risk of them being above ground? Because there's a risk associated with above ground, even though it's maybe more conventional.
Yeah, so some of the options here include a mix of underground and above ground. Generally, some electric companies, and Dan, you might speak more, some say underground is better, but you know, when there's if you're digging, there's a higher risk there. You know, there's a less risk from wind, but there's a higher risk from digging. Dan, you might.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to both. You know, underground, you can't see it. So you can't, it's harder to locate and find the problem. Overhead, you can run the line out. So obviously you can see it better. But I mean, as long as we locate it, we do the best we can to, you know, for underground, so it's both. You know, both good, so either way. I would say, you know.
Just seems like there'd be a maintenance expense to overhead wires, ice, wind. I don't know, that's what you guys.
We do that that's part of our job, you know, so we do that, it's mixed, you know, the tree trimming. So that's kind of a plus, I mean, we do it all the time, so that's kind of, you know, it's cheaper overhead, obviously. Altogether, even maintenance wise.
Yeah, for this purpose though, it's really what my concern is if we don't want to put them all in the same, to bundle them together. So usually you have one overhead and two underground or vice versa.
Anyone else? No, Mr. Mulder?
I'm Bill Mulder, Summit Street, and I was really encouraged by the cost estimates on some of these options. And I think, you know, it seems like this looks promising enough that it would warrant taking the next step to get full data so we could do an informed comparison among all the different options. If there was one that could work to locate it up there, there are so many collateral benefits. You know, like preserving where the deer park is for future use. We could, you know, keep that, who knows, you know, what the future will bring, and we may want to do something different than the deer park, or we may love the deer park for the next 50 years. And, you know, once we build something down here and build a wall around it, it's probably there for 100 years. So I think it'd just be tremendous if one of those options could work. And the matter of it is, why don't we get the data and do an informed comparison?
Anyone else?
Question. When we talked about the substation before, and I may totally be off base, but wasn't it discussed that it was more efficient in the city, like closer?
Yeah,
is that still the same, or is this not far?
And Dan or Lucas, you might want to answer, but I think the closer to the center of the load is where we want it. And the further we go out toward the Bester Road, that option it's further out, it's about 0.8 miles from my understanding from here. But Dan, if you.
And that was one of our original options, was that
Was
location.
this one right here.
It's in the area.
Yeah, it's still within the area. The further we go out, like this one, or go out further that way, we're getting further away from that center. But this is close enough to that center where, we wouldn't really be losing.
That one is.
Yeah,
Far off one.
this
You're
one's,
flirting with.
yeah, right here, this one, we're starting to flirt exactly
Yeah,
with,
okay.
with too far outside that.
So it's also about efficiency.
Right, yep,
not
yep.
just cost.
We're also looking at, voltage loss and all that stuff that we want, redundancy and all that stuff.
But you're right, the farther away you are from the center of the load, the more loss you have.
I also think something down here is security. We talked about this before, because the further out it is away from where it's accessible, I think the security here would probably be the best. Where it's next to the police station, obviously, and in an area that's more attended to 24/7 as opposed to out somewhere.
We did have an incident at our substation out on Conway Road.
Well, you'd like to think that's not gonna happen, but you need to.
I just think we need to consider that.
Someone would cut the grounding to steal the copper. Something like that. Yeah. We don't.
Harder to do when you're next to the police station.
Yeah, you'd have to have a little bit.
Yes, Ben.
This would be really hard to quantify or put a number to, but I think there's tremendous benefit from not totally disrupting our neighborhoods, like either here with the houses in Weekly and Zoll or on Lake Street. But I mean, how do you put that into a financial comparison? And then this also is adjacent to parkland, so that would preclude anything we might want to do with it as part of parks down the road. I'm sorry, downtown. So that would, to me, be another reason to keep it outside.
Anyone else? Anyone online, Victor?
Don't see any hands raised.
So what you're looking for is a council decision whether to continue to pursue these options and any other options, or whether to continue with the definition of the project right here on Zoll Street.
Yeah, I mean, more specifically, if there are of these 5 options that are presented to you, I was planning on going back to the property owner and talking to him about the options that council is willing to consider. Like, are all 4 options still on the table after seeing the cost estimates, or do you want to look at just, the first 3 options or whatnot? So that's really what I'm getting direction from council for. So that way, or is there no options, or you just want to stick to this option at the Deer Park? So
How much work would it be to do a comparison on the Lake Street site? Just to cover all our bases here.
well, we essentially have the Lake Street. We have that one available.
Can we put it in the mix so that it's, so that we can really compare all the sites that were deemed to be an okay place to put it? Would that be possible?
Yeah, it's part of the packet several months ago, so I
Yeah.
can just dig that information.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a wise thing to do. For me, the most expensive option out on Besser, I could feel comfortable dropping. I mean, I think the reliability is not gonna be as good. It's a bundle of all 4 lines. It's further out from the center. So to me, that one, if we're gonna drop something, I think that would make sense.
Yeah, and as one of the reasons we also included that option too is because back in the day, a long time ago, when you build transmission lines, you just cut through properties and you took the shortest route. Now it's becoming more common to follow the roads, even though it's more expensive. Yeah. Anyway,
And that also opens up a lot of neighbors looking at the, easements and neighbors, and I can foresee this just getting pushed and pushed. So for me, also, I think the questions for the owner of the property is, will you consider this if we don't bury everything? I mean, is it even an option, or is your real reason for doing this that you want all the lines buried? Because then that would help us to narrow things down expense wise.
I don't think we have all the answers yet
Yeah.
in order to make that decision. But I agree, I'd be tempted, to me, the 2 higher, they're just financially too far off the mark. I don't think it would pay. We don't know if there's any cost associated with the property. And, you know, property purchases can be pretty funny. People think their land is worth a lot of money. So how much that could or would offset. And I want to say, we're making these comparisons to the cost on Zoll Street with a wall, $750,000. We're not doing apples to apples. I want us to be careful with that. We don't have resolution on the easement. You know, if we know that he's not interested, unless it's buried, or he's just not interested in the traffic, we need to know that. So I think we need to pursue it further. Adding, I think, we went through a whole set of discussions and the logic behind Lake Street, and maybe putting it up to compare it makes a lot of sense, since it's been brought up a number of times.
Yes, and my little bit of input here, I think by having the conversations already started with this property owner, I think it would be fair of the city to put all of the information that we're looking at in front of him.
Absolutely.
So whatever decision is made, he's understanding of why.
You know, it's been pointed out, this is a decision for decades to come. So let's consider all the different variables.
I think it's worth pursuing another conversation. I mean, we're not moving forward with this project immediately, that it doesn't hurt having another conversation.
Yep, that's a good point. We are moving forward on, you know, the process for purchasing a transformer, but that transformer can go at any location.
That's a long pole, so we should do that anyway.
And we are actually going forward with the survey of our transmission line, because that's gonna go forward part of the project anyways. Okay, yeah, we do have Martha. Martha, you can speak. You have to unmute yourself.
This is Joel Dykstra House. I'm curious about one thing. When these transformer stations are put into place and everything's looked at, security is a real high note, especially in the future, at least looking at national substations. And I think somebody here brought up the point of security here. I'd like to know what that is, because I'm going to be powered by it and I don't want to lose the substation due to areas because it's so remote that nobody's watching it. Does that make sense?
So you're asking what type of security?
Yeah. Are we looking at any kind of security around the substation if you'd build it up here on Bester?
So I can speak to that. We are actually looking at security cameras for our existing location after we had the cut of the wire there. Lucas, I don't know if you want to expand further.
Yeah, I started to explore some of the options for video surveillance out on the Clayton Road site, which could be utilized in either case, whether it's right here or in another one. And those sites would be monitored, like I said, 24/7. They can alert if you want them to. So you don't want an alert every time an animal walks through, because it's going to happen, but you could get alerts for, they can differentiate a little bit between if there's a vehicle or, you know, there's some human recognition factors that you can throw in there, so that it's not just literally pinging your phone all the time, but you would be alerted if there was some odd motion or activity at the site.
But the Bester Road location would have a fence around it, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, any site would have a fence.
So
Go ahead.
I would assume that if it's fenced, and then it can be detected if somebody's screwing with the fence or somebody touches the fence.
Would it be electric fence? If that's what you mean, it wouldn't be electrified.
Good idea.
Well, I don't even think it has to be electrified, but I would assume.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there's some type of motion detecting
Right.
sensors that we could have a perimeter set up to notify, yes.
Yes, I would assume if somebody touched the fence, that security would be notified. That's all I'm asking. And I'm just saying, has that been taken into consideration? Because I don't think you want a standalone transformer station out in the middle of the woods, okay? That's not with those capabilities, particularly for the future. That's it. That's all my comment is. Okay?
Thank you.
I just have a thought, and this might be a very minor concern, but do we know what likelihood there might be that 50 years from now, we need another transformer? If that might be a possibility, we have the Pennsylvania's location and the Lake Street location now, and those would be available to us at any point in time. Doing something outside of town to purchase property, if we needed to do that 50 years from now, could be significantly more expensive or not available to us.
So I think that's a good point. I think there's a couple of things to consider those. We're not gonna be completely sure on which way the load growth goes. Remember, so the reason we relocated this one from here out to Clayton Road is because we had anticipated, part of the reason was all the growth was gonna go that way. And the growth didn't happen that way. A lot of the growth happened in the center and toward West Traverse Township. So it's a good idea, but you can't predict some of these things on where the growth is gonna happen. And currently, the center of the load is where it needs it, so. But yeah, it's a good idea to have backup locations in the future.
I was just gonna comment on the security. I don't think that just because it's next to the police station, it necessarily means anything's more secure. I mean, the tunnel's right next to the police station, there's still drawing graffiti in there. So the police station is here, but it doesn't mean there's anyone there or that it's going to actually deter people.
We are working, I think, part of the CIP, which is a good point, that bring in security cameras for certain locations.
Well, you're gonna have to have security no matter where we put it,
Right.
we're gonna have to have security. I just think the chance right here is less that something major is gonna happen than out where no one is.
And again, it's not something we like
They
to
won't
think
have bad
about,
enough.
but when it happens.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a national problem. The security systems that are available can get pretty sophisticated, and they'll distinguish between a dog, a deer, a man, and a truck. So, and that has been on, it's been on the list for this project from day one.
Yeah.
It's a decision, as many others, of how you implement it and where you put it. So what I'm hearing, in the absence of more input, is add Lake Street. Get back with the property owners, because there's really two of them. One for the easement, one for the property. Show them the work that's been done and answer some of the questions that we don't have answers to.
But take option 5 out.
That doesn't work. If nothing else, just the reliability of.
Right.
You know, you're eliminating redundancy. I don't think we should do that.
I'm good with that. I'm thinking that makes sense.
Is that what you need?
Yeah, so we'll talk with the property owner and see where his interest is on any of these options. And then after that, maybe we'll decide talking to the easement owner there to see, depending on how that conversation goes with.
Right. I mean, you're, it's a toe in the water with a negotiation, the trade-off. The cost of the project versus the cost of the land and what the real, to the best of our ability today, what the bottom line really is.
Sounds good.
And then just quickly, in the criteria of making decisions, you guys are looking at every angle from everything that we do. Obviously, mine's finances. However, now that I've worked here and been in this business for a couple decades, there is non-monetary reasons for doing things that are maybe beneficial to us in the long run. That might not just be, we're saving $1 million, but we're gonna be tangled up in lawsuits for 25 years because of it. So I try to weigh that out when I'm thinking about how I'm gonna find $10 million. So just an input.
A valid one. So you have what you need.
Yep, good. Dan and Lucas, we'll get together. Yep. All right, thank you. All right, on to item 3C, which is board and commission's term limit discussion. And to clarify, because term limits can mean a couple different things, we already do have limits for the number of years a term is. So let's say you apply to be on the planning commission, DDA, whatnot, there's 3 or 4 year terms or 2 year terms if it's on parks or tree board, for example. So we have those term limits, but what was brought up at the previous council meeting was the number of terms someone can serve before being termed out. And
Just like we have for council.
for council, you can serve 3 terms consecutively before you have to sit a year out, and
A term.
Do you have to sit a term out or a year out?
I think it's a year.
It's a year.
It's a year.
It's a year out.
You have to sit 1 year out, not 1 term out.
It's a year.
You have to take a year break.
Bank, right?
So, yep, so for example, John Leo and John Cups, well, John Leo served 3 terms, so this is his last council meeting. Yeah, but anyway, so that's an example of how we do it at the elected level. But we don't have those kind of term limits for our board and commission members. So I was asked to do some research into this. And so I did survey Northern Michigan city managers, the ones that I spoke to, about 5, I think. They don't have any limits on the number of terms one can serve. I did a random online search of about 20 cities, charters, and bylaws in Michigan. Didn't find any limits in number of terms. The Michigan Planning Enabling Act, Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, and Downtown Development Authority Act do not put any restrictions on our ability to limit the number of terms one can serve. So that was a concern I had, was if the state law prevented us from doing that. I did find in Ann Arbor, they do limit their planning commission board members to only serving in the same officer role for 2 consecutive terms. Some parks boards, and I know I've talked with Rachel about this, they have rotating chairs, and other boards, nonprofits especially, they rotate their chairs. Can't serve consecutive chairships, even though they don't have limits on how many terms you can serve. Even though Ann Arbor's planning commission did that, the Michigan Planning Enabling Act says that an officer's term shall be 1 year with an opportunity to be reelected as specified in the city's bylaws. So to me, that's not clear if that means they say they have an opportunity to be reelected, but then here Ann Arbor is saying, they only can serve 2 consecutive terms. So I would have to have Jim do some more research on whether or not we could actually limit a chair from, on the planning commission at least, from serving more than 2 years as chair. Anyway, I could have gotten more in the weeds, but my general feeling in the municipal world is there's really no term limits for number of terms you can serve for boards. In the nonprofit world, there is. I read some statistics anywhere between 50 and 60% of nonprofit boards have either term limits on officers or on regular office, on people who serve on that. So, but 2 different things, of course, nonprofit versus city. I won't go in detail over the pros and cons list. I'm sure you read it, but there's a lot of pros and cons on each side. One that stuck out for me is, there's actually a lot of them stick out where, for example, no term limits can lead to some members relying more on their own historical knowledge and instinct rather than the advice of city staff who are paid to do objective assessments, which is a pro for having term limits. But then the con is, the flip of that is that if you don't have term limits, then, if you do have term limits, then they're gonna rely more on city staff for policy recommendations, which could lead to the city administration running the show, basically. If you always have new people coming in and they don't really understand completely what's going on, then they're always gonna be looking at staff. Well, if you have people who have been on for so long, they might not look to staff as much. Those aren't necessarily true, but these are just some potential things. So, there's a lot of, interesting things. I know one is that my biggest concern with term limits is that we have a small population from which to choose from. For some boards, we have many people applying, Harbor Commission and Planning Commission. We always have people applying. For zoning board, board of review, and tree board, it's sometimes hard to find people.
Sewer authority.
Yeah, one way to get around that, and I noted that in here, would be to potentially add language such as that individual would stay on the board until a successor has been found. And do you want to rely on that? I don't know. That's a judgment call. But there are plenty of pros and cons on doing it either way. Whether or not you want to limit the number of terms someone can serve, or whether the number of years they can serve consecutively as an officer. Usually ours are chair and vice chair. Treasurer and secretary roles don't really have big roles on our boards so much, because Nick is like the treasurer for all of them. Anyway, but yeah, so that was my research. I could do more, but
No, I think you did a great job and it's, you wouldn't think it'd be this complicated, but it is. Do we get some input?
Yeah.
Any comments from the public? Yes.
Here I am again. In regards, I looked at the pros and cons. And so I started kind of thinking about them and in regards to the loss of historical and organizational knowledge. Unless past board members are moving away from the area, I would hope they'd be happy to help with the sitting board with any knowledge and expertise they might have. They're a valuable resource to our city. And after a term off, they may decide to rejoin the board. In terms of loss of beneficial expertise, we really don't know what's out there until we tap it. There could be a lot of beneficial experts in our community who just need a chance to contribute. And again, I would hope past board members could be tapped for knowledge when needed. Regarding the term limits could disrupt progress and cohesiveness of work, look at our city council. These members can leave after 1 term, 2 years, or they could stay 3 terms, 6 years. Their learning curve is steep and fast, as they are expected to come in full bore. They are from the get-go working on all types of concerns and situations. Everything from complicated substations to lawsuits to approving waterfront rates, selling property, tackling short-term rentals, affordable housing, and city budgets. They work on the whole health and welfare of the city and in a short-term length. In terms of finding board and commission members, I would hope, besides the city website and paper advertising, the people who are on the boards right now should be reaching out to people that they may know that have expertise or knowledge that could be considered for the different boards. They are our best advocates and they can help with the learning curves for new members. I do agree with the caveat that says a member may be held over and continue to serve until a qualified successor has been appointed. Before we decide to cap the board and commission terms at a specific length, I would like to hear from the sitting members on the different commissions. I would like them to kind of go over at their next meeting, the pros and cons on term limits and officer role limits. And maybe they could report to the city manager their thoughts for consideration. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah.
This is somewhat related. I'm Karen Stroud from Iron Street to this discussion, but I've brought this up in the past. I think it'd be really helpful when you're looking to replace a board member because of term limits, whatever, that we create job descriptions, I guess I would say, for each commissioner board. Like what kind of skills are you looking for as you appoint people to a board? Ideally, I'm sure many of those skills might exist in the community, but until they're really specifically laid out, I don't think people really know what it is you're looking for in terms of somebody's ability or potential contribution to a board. So I would suggest that we start looking at that, creating skill sets required or requested, or however you might want to lay it out on a description for, because each board is so different and the needs are so different and the knowledge base is different. So I think that would be helpful rather than just trying to put bodies on boards.
We have done that. We passed that earlier this year. We passed the
We
policy.
actually do have that
Yeah,
for each board.
Yeah, for each board, we have it in one document where we put each board what the qualifications and skills we would like to see on them. And so obviously we just passed it, so it's relatively new, so it's not that public out there, but it is out there. We could push it out there more, but we do have that.
So that'd be good.
So it's on the website.
It's on the website under the citizen participation where the application's at.
Well, that's good to know. I was not aware of that.
No,
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
It's pretty new.
It's pretty new, yeah.
And it came out of the desire to get the word out
Yeah,
about
sure.
boards and commissions too. And I think over the last number of years, we've seen an increase in interest in serving on boards and commissions. That I think is great.
Great, thank you.
Perhaps in that segue period when one role is being replaced with another person, I agree that probably for the most part, people would be willing to help the incoming person, but maybe it's something that's actually put into your description, that that's an expectation. that perhaps, you know, as the torch is handed over to somebody else, we expect you to help that next person for X amount of time, or, you know, just to kind of come at it at the front end, you know, that as you leave, please remember that we expect you to help this new coming person. I mean, kind of spiral it up. Possibility.
All right, we usually put that on the staff.
Okay.
When a new person comes in, that's usually, you know, Jeff is always, it'd be nice to, and I agree, it'd be nice to have them. It's just hard to get volunteers once they're like, I'm done with something.
Yeah.
Especially when they're not paid.
I like the idea of stating it as a bit of an expectation, and I think the chair of each board would have the same interest, whether they're outgoing, incoming, or static. You want that continuity.
Well, also, when someone is potentially interested in getting on a board, they have the ability to come to those meetings for the 6 months, 3 months, whatever they can handle. I'm looking at Michael and Kathy sitting in front of me. They have the ability to come to those meetings, so they can take that responsibility on themselves to get a little bit up to speed of what's expected of them. And maybe there's some way to put that out there. I don't know, but
We can think about it.
yeah, just a way to encourage people to do that.
Kathy Marshall on Sergeant Street. Actually, I want to add to that, when I was a new member of the CBA, it can be kind of, it was a board that was, I asked to be on another board, and he said, no, this is where we really need somebody. Would you like to do that? I said, sure. First meeting as an alternate, there weren't enough members, and I got thrown into voting. It would have been really nice if someone had taken me aside for half an hour and said, this is my experience. So I'm not picking on anybody. And I did talk to staff, and there was very useful. It was also a ton of information to absorb and agree. So I like the idea of a little background for assistance. Yeah.
Question, sorry. When people apply to the board, I haven't looked at the application that closely. Do they have to choose an alternate? Like, let's say I really want to get on planning commission. Do I have to put a second choice?
No, you can list as many as you want. You can
say any board. Some of them say, I'll be on anything, and some are like, I just want to be on this one.
I guess when it comes to the comment that it's a small population, I agree with that, and that's a concern. But the tree board, parks board, whichever board it is, that doesn't have, you know, the poll, it's gonna be the same no matter what, whether you put this rule in or not. It's not gonna make, I guess I don't see what the difference will be. It'll just be those people are still on it until you find, but it's no different than now. If people don't apply.
One person's opinion would be, if we do have term limits, it's gonna motivate the boards and the commissions as they see people approaching term limit to find someone else. How dramatic it will change. I mean, today, when people are interested, they come to the meeting. They want to see what it's like. They want to be involved in tree board or ZBA or whatever. Putting it in place just gives us a little more structure and maybe a little more communication with all the boards and commissions about expectation. I like the idea of turnover. I don't like the idea of losing, you know, a lot of expertise. Where's the balance?
Well, and if all we're asking is either a year or a term, whatever, that's a pretty quick turnaround.
Right.
And if somebody is really motivated to still be involved, they can be in the public for the year they take off and then reapply.
Which we have seen happen.
Yeah.
I have just one question, one comment. If someone terms out on one board or commission, would they be available to serve on a different board or commission?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it would be per commission.
That might give you some crossover. That's good.
My one concern with this is related to the board review. Specifically, that board has a state requirement that every other year they have to take a class on education on various rules and regulations, laws for that board, and those build from year to year. So I would just make the one ask, if it's possible, if we are thinking about term limits, to not put those in place for the board of review. Because those educational years build on each other, and losing that knowledge and education from those classes would be detrimental to that board, I think.
What are their terms? I couldn't find the term for the board review. How long is it?
The state sets those terms. I believe it's a 3-year term. I'd have to
Yeah,
double
that's
check.
fine. I just couldn't find, I looked up all the terms and there were a couple I couldn't find.
The state also says that they have to take an 8-hour education
Yeah.
class once every other year.
Are they paid for
Um,
their time?
they were paid originally because it is a significant time commitment. When we have our board of review meetings, specifically in the March meeting. They're there for a week in March for over 12 hours in 1 week. So we were paying them. I think at one point in time they asked to not be paid anymore, but I think on our books, we do say that we pay.
But we wouldn't have, if we decide to do term limits, we wouldn't have to do them for every single commission, am I right? I mean, we could say, here are the ones that we have lots of interest in and it's not turning over well. You know, and we could try it on several of them and see how that worked. And then I agree with you, there are some that it's gonna be a challenge if we do term limits. And maybe it's not necessary to do them on those boards. And our terms go, the ones I could find go from 2 years on Park and Rec, which tends to be the shortest, to 4-year terms.
I think now that we have like more guidelines in place as to like what qualifies you for a board. I think that as council, we should just be more diligent about looking at, like maybe even having a checklist, like they have this experience, they don't have this, and getting the turnover that way by picking new people instead of necessarily being like, oh, you applied or you've been on it, so you're a shoo-in and we aren't going to consider other options. And we didn't have that last year. It was, we just picked and then we established those.
Well, until very recently, it was always, if you wanted to stay on, you got to stay on.
Right.
There was no discussion about it to speak of.
But now we have the option.
And we've done, I think we've made some headway in that, certainly. I personally do believe term limits would be a good thing on some boards where there's a lot of interest in those boards. I don't know exactly how to do all of that, but I do think it's certainly something we should consider putting in place.
I think there are benefits to it. I'd like to see, I've seen over the last, well, even before I was on council, you see new blood come in. And it's good. There's a learning curve, but so you were thrown in the deep end of the pool, but you survived. And now, I mean, it was talked about. I mean, it's not life threatening. And you learn as you go, and there are, N number of other people on the board of commission to help you through. And I think that works really well. I landed on the same idea of getting feedback or input from the chairs of all the boards and commissions, how they feel and how they see it might affect their particular group. I don't feel comfortable doing it in a vacuum without their input, because it will affect all of them differently.
I think that's fine.
And that brings up a good question, and I don't know if there's something council decides to do in the future. Obviously, we'll have 2 new council members on next meeting, but is this something that we would change for the bylaws for each particular board, or would be some sort of city code amendment? That's something we'd have to think about, whether or not, if we do a blanket term limit for them, or whether it's more appropriate to do in the bylaws. So that's something that we just have to consider. What's the best route?
Well, and if we want to do it by number of terms or number of years that we look at, it's gonna have to be basically in the bylaws, because all the terms they're different on different committees.
Well, it's interesting. I did find some communities in their city charter where they put the number of years for their terms are actually ingrained and etched in the charter.
Really?
Yeah, there's a couple I found there. So it's just, and I don't know, I'm not saying we should do our charter. I mean, it's hard enough to get a simple change to our charter, let alone something substantial. But I just think communities do it differently from my research so far. So I think we just need to think a bit about how we want to do that going forward. Especially if you even want to consider rotating chairs or rotating officers.
But even rotation on officers would offer some, I think, some benefits, We don't see a lot of that. And I think it might help to have other people step up to be the chair for a while on a co-chair. You don't lose the expertise, but you get somebody empowered and in a position that might actually motivate people to join. It's non-trivial, but I'd like to hear from the chairs. And because I think it'll vary. It's good, they're not all, I wouldn't do it globally because they're all so different. I mean, Board of Review for one. But let's give some feedback. That's just me. But I like the idea.
I think forcing people to change the chair may deter some people from wanting to be on boards, just because when you are the chair, the vice chair, it a lot of times requires a lot more of you. And that could put somebody in a place where they don't have the time, they can come to the meetings, but they can't necessarily put in the hours that some of our chairs do. Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Which time you put in on your.
Yeah, but you would have a choice of 7 or 9 or however many are on the
Right.
committee. It wouldn't be like everybody has to be chair. You know,
Right,
it's just, you maybe couldn't be chair for, 4 terms in a row.
Maybe, I think we're talking about trying to motivate a beneficial behavior for the city.
Yeah.
How you do that.
I do just want to also respond to Lisa, one thing you said about plans. I think you made a good point about council, that they can jump in and they learn stuff and they do things. From my experiences, when we had a lot of turnover at once for the planning commission, when we had a bunch of new planning commission members and we started working on the planning and the master plan, it was very difficult to transition with a whole slew of new people, to look at how do we update our master plan when most of them hadn't even known what the master plan was about. So kind of now that we have the same group that adopted the master plan that's working on zoning code, they know what the master plan says, they know what the community says, so while they're doing the zoning code updates, it's kind of helped. So that's where, where you just want to be a little cautious of, and a lot of that is just historically, as I think you've said, there hasn't been a lot of balance of turnover, right? There's been people stay on for a decade, 2 decades, and then all of a sudden a lot of people turn over at once, and that's more of a problem than a rotating kind of, all right, one new person this year, and there's 4 remaining people, and then next year, to keep that kind of balance
And
going.
we have that pretty well straightened out.
Yeah, we do have that,
In terms of
yeah.
We've got them, so there are
The
2
staggering,
people
yeah.
going off as opposed to 7
Yeah.
going off at one time.
The staggering was very, so we fixed that, but it was just a concern that, I noticed when we were doing the master plan, was like, all right, we had all these new people, and now, I think we had like 7 out of the 9 were new people, 6 out of the 9, and it was.
Well, made worse by that's one of probably the most complicated.
Yeah.
Topic you're dealing with.
So by your point, well taken, it's just, that was my thought when I was thinking about that was.
So I think if we get a little bit of input from the chairs.
Yeah, I would share this with the chairs and say, this is what we're thinking about doing, this is what we're trying to motivate, and see what they say. We get to do it and they get to live with it.
Well, and also just see what we've done already this year as far as putting out the qualifications for each board and see if that actually changes, like who we get to apply and how many people we get to apply for the different boards. Because that didn't exist last year.
Okay.
All right, I got the direction there. Thank you.
Thank you for the work.
Yeah. All right, a few updates. Elections tomorrow. I'm sure most of you know, because you guys are here, so you do pay attention. We do have the ballot initiative on the city-owned property in Little Traverse Township, as well as 2 openings for council. Both the candidates are here. Front row. Fall Fest was a hit, right, Rachel? With over 300 people in attendance. Yeah, so that was good, even though we rescheduled
Oh,
it.
yeah, that was with a rescheduled day, which made it
Yeah.
even more impressive.
Yeah, so it was good. Skate park reconstruction will be completed mid-November next week.
This week,
This week.
maybe
done.
Friday.
I was out there, I was driving by yesterday and there was 10 guys out there going to town. That was great.
So staff, meaning Parks Director Rachel, met with Harbor Inc. to coordinate fundraising and grant funding plan for the bike path, because we do have the approval, obviously, last year to go underneath the tunnel, underneath the road, I'm sorry, and then also the state gave us the county gave us an easement to go on Bay Bluff's property for the bike path. So we have the design almost ready, and they're gonna start a fundraising plan for that. We are applying for a state of Michigan energy infrastructure grant to support some of our city's electric projects. I mentioned previously, we're looking grant money for the substation. However, this grant didn't seem suitable for the substation because the amount of funds were too little. So they have about $2 million available for all municipal electric utilities. So assuming we all, or several of us got it, we only talking about a couple $100,000 at stake. So, and we did, so applying together, we are applying together with the MMEA with other electric utilities. And part of that is there's pre-reviewed projects that they have, such as dead tree removal and, replacing poles and stuff like that. That doesn't mean they're pre-approved, but they've already been pre-reviewed that, these are topics that they'll accept applications for. So we, Lucas, Dan, and I, we worked pretty hard on getting a lot of this grant information over to the MMEA. They're gonna look over what we provided with them. And a lot of it is to cover things that we normally do anyway, to cover our labor costs and stuff like that. Hopefully we get some grant money there, but I'm just not sure, they are redirecting a lot of money to Justice 40 communities, those that have economic, needs. So like Northern Emmett County is part of the Justice 40 community, but we're not. So I don't know how many utilities serve those communities, they're municipal, but basically we have $2 million, a $2 million pool to get money from. The Christmas tree is going up November 8th, right? Is Dan still there? No, but November 8th, I think, so Wednesday it's going up. Just, it's not gonna be lit yet, but it's just going up. Yeah, watch for it. The city and the pier hosting a fundraiser for the rebuilding of the eastern portion of the boardwalk. That's gonna be Friday, December 15th. You can contact Rachel Roon, our Parks Director, for more details on how to purchase tickets. There's a flyer out there with a QR code you can scan as well. So speaking of boards and commissions, we do have openings on all of our boards. We've had an opening on tree board for a few months now, and that's been vacant, but there's I believe a couple on each board. So we do have several applicants already for some of them, Harbor Commission, Planning Commission, and DDA, tree board, we're still looking. Tree board, anybody tree board? And ZBA, yes, we'll have 2 current ZBA members rotating out because they'll be on council. And so we'll have, but we'll still have an opening potentially on the ZBA that will be fun. I just had just basic stats again, our website stat. We do have 215 people signed up for email notices for these meetings, which I found has increased attendance at a lot of our meetings. Obviously, we have, so you can sign up for email notices for any of our boards and commissions, 68% open rate. So most people are paying attention to them. Usually it appears in the subject line of the email, council meeting, November 6th, 12 p.m. People find that useful. I get a lot of comments about that one. And we also send our newsletter out, push it through that way as well. So we do have a lot of followers on Facebook, 2,200 plus. So more people than people that live in the city limits. So we got fans, I guess.
Oh, we have fans.
And Instagram, we have 1,500 people. So we also have fans there. But just go through some of the board meetings here. Parks Board went over Fall Fest, Shade Park, and the Historical Society discussion about use at the Shade Park, fundraising for the boardwalk, and sledding is coming up at Kiwanis Park again. Could have done it this past week, but Planning Commission had a big agenda on October 19th. We were there for at least 3.5 hours at that meeting, but we had a lot split, 2 special land uses and site plan, and discussions on bluff vegetation management and flag lots. So that was a big meeting that I don't recommend. Again,
It's a good meeting.
It was a good meeting though, yeah. Tree Board completed its reviews of neighborhoods and streets for potential areas to plant state trees. So we were looking at what areas could use more trees or had enough trees, or so Dan and the Tree Board have been working diligently on that. I think we've wrapped it up and now we're going to put it in one final document. So we have kind of a plan for how to approach what streets, prioritizing which areas need trees and don't. And we do have several trees from donors that we still have left to plant. So this is going to help us, where we should plant trees first. And DDA had a special meeting to discuss 3rd Street lighting. And they'll be talking about it again, I'm sure, soon. Some basic meetings that I'm on boards of. CC 911, we had a regular board meeting. MPPA Clean Energy Program Review and next steps for 2024. So remember, a couple of years ago, the state dropped their legal requirement for us to provide clean energy incentives because our MPPA and MMEA, we, kind of convinced them that, we could take this on by ourselves. So we've, been continuing with our program without having to do all the tracking and reporting, but still, so that has given us more money to spend on products and rebates for the customers. However, new legislation, and it's gonna start in 2025, is they're gonna put that requirements back in place. So good thing we've kept with this. They're not gonna be the same exact requirements. They're not gonna be as stringent as they were before, but they are gonna have some more redirected clean energy requirements. And this is where you see an energy optimization fee on your electric bill. It's a couple dollars for most people or something like that. I think it varies for commercial utilities, but sorry, for commercial business properties. So we're gonna continue that with 2024, and then when the new laws officially passes the Senate, I think it went through the House, I'm not sure which one, but when it's officially signed, we're gonna look at what kind of reporting we do, and we've contracted it out before, so we'll obviously contract it out with whatever company we use, but it's kind of disappointing because it takes away, it spends more money on administration than it does, because we spent the same amount of money to give more to the customers. Now we have to take a little bit more to spend on administration, but that's just the way the state works, so. And that's all I have. I know there's a lot there, but I don't know if any of my department heads have anything to add. Say, no. First time you're all in all in here together.
Thank you.
With new meetings. I know, yeah.
All the new business we need to have. I guess we're adjourned.
Okay, we have one more procedural thing. I'd like to say thank you to John Cups and then John Leo for their service to the city over the last 6 and 4 years.
Now we're.
Please take some desserts on your way out. Well, it's gonna be word in there today.
I'll go.